So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's good to see a couple of gentlemen here. My name is Arlene Naz. I serve as the structure chairman for the LWML. I've been on that committee for about 3.5 years. And Barb Volk is also going to help present today. She is the parliamentarian for the LWML. And you've been parliamentarian for how long, Barb?
10 or 12 years. I've lost track.
She's a certified parliamentarian or accredited
Professional registered parliamentarian.
professional registered parliamentarian. So she travels with Robert's Report. We also have on our committee Mary Smith and LaDonna Stanishek, and they have been absolutely marvelous and wonderful to work with. And then we have had the pleasure of being under the Vice President of Organizational Resources, Debbie Larson, and Debbie in the back. So, how many of you know what the word quorum means? Definition. What's quorum?
Depends on your bylaws, but generally more than that.
Okay, it's probably the number required to conduct business. So Barb, question for you. Is it still a quorum if half the people are asleep?
That's an excellent question, but we don't have to worry about it today. This will be so exciting that no way they will doze off.
Okay, so that was our attempt at humor. Okay. I know that all of you are just on the edge of your seat, waiting to learn more about bylaws and structure. Or perhaps you're hoping that we're done early and you want to be the first one out the door, because I'm hearing that lunch tonight, dinner, will be wonderful. Bylaws. Why do we have bylaws? They're necessary in helping an organization function and take action. Although perhaps not the most glamorous, they are very important. And I would like to read to you from 1 Corinthians 14, verse 40. But everything should be done in a fitting and orderly way. So that's one of the reasons why we have our bylaws and our structure. We want to do things in an orderly way. Usually if we do it that way, it takes less time. Everybody gets a chance to be heard, and the business is conducted. Right now we have 40 districts in our LWML, and each of them have their own unique set of bylaws, because I have copies of all of them. So we have 40 ways to do things right. So I would like you to make sure you have this handout. So this one is entitled Sequential Steps for District Bylaws Changes. This one can be found on the LWML website. If you go across the top on the right-hand side, About, scroll down a little bit, it'll say Structure. Highlight that one, it'll take you to these resources. On that same page off to the right on bylaws, they have some more bylaws resources that you might find beneficial. Samples of zone ones, samples of district ones, sample of group ones, suggestions on individual membership and those types of things. So you might find those at the very bottom of all of those resources. There will be a little PDF button that you can hit, and it'll just print off, instead of everything on your screen, it'll just print off that resource for you. So rather than weighting you down with too many papers and having your suitcase be overweight when you flew home, we're just giving you a couple of pieces of paper. So let's look at this. You don't want to rush your bylaws. The restructuring that we're doing here in LWML has been an ongoing process for several years. And so you don't want to rush this. Your district should, major approvals, you'll need to take at least a year, probably from the start to the beginning. These are the following steps. The district structure committee drafts revisions or amendments. How many of you have ever served on a district structure committee? Okay. Sometimes this may go the other way around. It may be your district executive committee or board of directors that goes to the structure committee and says, we want to change, we think we should change the bylaws in this way. And it will be up to you to go through those bylaws and see, okay, well, it's here, and then it's here, and then it's here, and get that correct. So once you've come up with these changes, the EC or Board of Directors in your district will approve them. Then they get sent to me, the structure committee chairman, or whomever that may be. After the convention next summer, it will be someone else. You can just send this in a Microsoft Word attachment. We have the capability on our Dropbox files to go into that. We make our edit comments, all of this off on the side, and we're good to go. So you said, and I hope you can hear me above the noise next door. I'm trying. So you should allow about 3 months for the structure committee to review your bylaws. Now, how many of you sent in bylaws to the structure committee this last biennium? Did you hear back from us within at least 3 months?
Yeah.
And some people go, yeah. One thing I do want to say, if you don't hear back when you send it in to me, we had one poor lady, you know, I haven't heard back from you. It was in her spam folder. It never got sent. Well, I didn't receive it, so we rushed that one through. I sent the rest of my committee and said, you know, it got lost in her spam folder. I finally got it now. Let's, you know, expedite progress, and we did. So we have a wonderful committee. We got it done in a fast time. We're going to look for some things that need to be in there. We're going to make sure that it has the articles and the name of the LWML organization, object, members, representation at conventions, and the parliamentary authority, which we use Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised. Don't say which number, just newly revised. So that when they keep revising them, we don't have to change our bylaws because it went from 11 to 13. Just newly revised. Okay? Then check for proper names and titles. We were just talking with someone here before. They've changed some of the names of some of their committee members or appointed personnel in one place, but we noticed when we read them, oh, but over here in Article 9, but you said in Article 5 didn't agree. So just make sure they're consistent. I'm going to send you perhaps some other little minor suggestions. You will get a compilation. It's a lovely little form, and I will say on there, you know, update your logo. A isn't, you know, you've got 3 A's, whatever the case may be. And usually they're very minor. You take that then to your structure committee is going to make the necessary changes, whatever they may be. Maybe there's nothing. Then you go to your district EC and board, and they give those proposed bylaws changes. Then probably in your standing rules, or convention rules, or someplace it says they have to go out to the delegates so far in advance. That can change. Like I said, we've got 40 districts, 40 ways to do it right. Each of them has slightly different things on how they send those bylaw suggestions out. As long as, you know, you're in agreement with that, that's fine. So at your delegates then are going to vote to adopt, not to adopt, to amend. And if they have to amend them, that probably has a specific set of procedures in their bylaws of how they do that. You can adopt part of it or not all of it or whatever the case may be. Then on the back side, the committee chairman should send me one copy in a Microsoft Word email attachment so I can put it in our shared Dropbox folder. So the person who follows on the committee next time has all of the district's bylaws there and knows what year they've been changed. Now, sometimes I wait quite a while to get some back. So if you've revised your bylaws in your district and had a convention and I haven't gotten them, you might be getting a little friendly reminder. Could you please? You know, because we just like to keep things. And I realize sometimes you've gotten a new structure chairman and maybe they didn't realize that that hadn't been done, and so we try to do it in a nice, encouraging way.
Do we just send the bylaw changes that were adopted,
No.
or you want a whole new
I want a
copy?
whole new copy of your bylaws, just like you're gonna have them on your, send out to your officers or have on your webpage, whatever they are, just send me the whole thing. And that's what we want. We want a complete copy of those bylaws so that if there's ever somebody gets lost or whatever, we got it. Yes, ma'am?
Now, when you send you the final revised bylaws, does that need to be in Word? Normally you send it out in PDF so nobody can change it.
It can also come to us in PDF. It says here it's in Word, but we can accept them in PDF.
I mean, the final ones.
The either way. Yeah. So that they're, yeah, you can send them to me in PDF. Because I'm just going to upload them to a Dropbox file. Label them according to our way we label them. If they don't get adopted, please also let me know. Okay? Because I'm going to wonder, whatever happened to the press itself? I'm picking on you. I'm sorry about that. You know. So, Next, if you take out this one, formatting your bylaws. When you present those bylaws at a district convention, you want to have, the top one is probably the one you see the most often, parallel form, where you state on one side what it is, you give a rationale, and what it's going to be. I think that's easier for the ladies to see, to understand. We want them to know why we're doing what we're doing. And it's their organization, they have a right to that input, they have a right to ask questions. Sometimes they have some very good input. And I told the ladies, the last group, everybody says, oh, every question is good. There is an exception to that. I taught middle school. Not every question those boys, especially asked, would be considered a good question. But that's a whole nother aside. So anyway, have your bylaws, and have somebody proof and help you do this. Because trust me, you can sometimes think it says something because you've read it 15 times and it really doesn't. Yeah, but this one is the preferred. The top one is probably the most common one, probably the one a little bit easier to follow for people, but the other one would also be considered acceptable. Okay, so we talked about how you're going to amend your bylaws and how you're going to format and send them out. And now we're going to let Barb talk to you about protocol.
All right. Well, it's a little more than just protocol. Let me get my notes up here. We, as Arlene mentioned, we try to do things in proper order. Guided by God's word, upheld in prayer. That's how we want to conduct all of our business. And over the years, rules of procedure have been developed to help us do this. They're there to help us conduct business, get the most business done in the shortest amount of time. Can you think of other rules in life that we have to have? Traffic rules. You have to know if you drive on the right or the left. If two people come to a stop, who gets to go first? You've got to have rules. You play a game. If you're out there on the basketball court and instead of bouncing the ball, someone runs with it, that's against the rules of the game. It's the same thing for a meeting. You've got rules so that everyone knows what you're supposed to be doing and how you're supposed to do it, or at least have a general idea of how that's going to go along. The one that the majority of nonprofit groups use is Robert's Rules of Order. Newly revised. The current edition is the 11th edition. They're already working on number 12. They try to do it about every 10 years. They update it. Who was this Robert guy? Henry Martin Robert was a Civil War general. Several years after the end of the war, he was still an active officer at that time. He was asked to come to a church meeting. They were having some problems getting decisions made. And figure, a general, he must know how to organize things. He could come and help them out. He said later it was the worst experience of his life. Because there were no rules. Now, there are rules that were rules in Parliament, there were rules in the U.S. Congress, states, but they weren't designed for a smaller group that was trying to make a decision. People kept having different motions and wanting to do things, and discussion was going on. So he went home and wrote up a 16-page booklet of guidelines, rules for holding a meeting. And over the years, it has turned into this. Yeah. Most of this, you and your everyday society, zone, district meetings don't have to worry about. About 10 years ago, the same people that put out the big one put out this little one, which is great. It's in brief, and it talks about the basic rules that you would want to have for running a meeting. There's a reference on the back page with the title, so you could go to, if you are lucky enough to have a local bookstore or Amazon or whatever, and get that. It's very helpful to have. How many district presidents do we have in here? Okay, quite a few. But the rest of you are part of the meeting. You may not be running the meeting, but you should know how to function as a member of an organization during a meeting. When you use parliamentary procedure consistently, there are certain things that are basic principles. Courtesy. You shouldn't have people yelling or insulting one another in a meeting. Big thing, one main motion at a time, one issue. Finish up with that one before you go to something else. The majority rules, but the minority has the opportunity to be heard, to speak, and try to convince a few of those other people that maybe you're right. But once the decision is made and the majority has voted, then that's the decision of the whole group. There are various rules for an assembly. The first one is law, national, state. You have to abide by national or state law. Some groups, the LWML at the national level is incorporated. We have a charter, chartered in the state of Missouri. There are a couple of districts, and I don't even remember which ones they are, that have over the years chosen to be separately incorporated. But most of the districts operate as part of the national LWML. Missouri is not a real friendly state. The laws are not designed for, even though it says nonprofit corporate law, the emphasis is on the corporate. It's not on the nonprofit. So that's one of the reasons for this proposed revision that the district presidents heard some more about, revision of the bylaws to help us comply with some of Missouri's laws. But what you're going to be most familiar with is what Arlene was talking about, the bylaws. And this is what the group has agreed, how you have agreed to run the organization, whether the local society, zone, district, or national. Sometimes it's, most commonly, and the preferred term is bylaws as a whole. Sometimes you'll still see it called a constitution. Sometimes it's the Constitution and bylaws, even if it's only one document. But it doesn't matter what it's called. That's what you operate on. And then you have the rules of order, which is what you use for conducting business. That's the purpose of this, is to help you conduct your business. Not to run the whole organization, just to conduct your business. Sometimes a group wants to have slightly different rules than you find here, and that's fine. Robert says if what he has doesn't work for you, as long as you don't violate any of the basic principles of parliamentary procedure, you can change your rules. One of Robert's rules says for debating, an individual can talk twice to an issue for 10 minutes at a time. That usually gets a little long for most people. So very often people will have their own special rules that say you're limited to 2 minutes. So that rule would supersede what Robert says. And there may be other issues that that says something you would rather operate a different way. That's fine, as long as you're in agreement and you pass that as a special rule. Then you have your standing rules, and this has to do with the administration. How much do you pay for mileage? That's not a Roberts rule. How much do you keep a register book? Your guests sign in all the time. That doesn't have anything to do with Roberts. That's just that the secretary is responsible for that. And then you come to custom, which is we've always done it that way. And that's fine. That's actually listed in here as one of the rules. As long as it doesn't violate any principle of parliamentary procedure, as long as it doesn't violate your bylaws, that's fine. You can just keep operating as long as everyone's happy. Just keep doing it the way you're doing. That's considered one of those unwritten rules. Yeah.
Just one comment about vocabulary, unless they changed it in the 11th edition, that sometimes causes confusion when people pull out Robert's Rules of Order. And that is that Roberts will refer to bylaws, and that's what most organizations refer to as their constitution. And when Roberts speaks of standing rules, that's what most organizations refer to as their bylaws.
Okay, that's true in a lot of congregations. Yeah, you will find that. But what we at LWML go by is that we use the term bylaws, and I think pretty much all of our 40 districts use the term bylaws. So we try to adhere to the terminology in Roberts on that. But yeah, there are a lot of congregations that still use a different terminology. Yeah. Yeah.
We ladies, we just separate past.
There are, in order to make your decisions, there are certain steps when you make a motion. They're listed here briefly. One person would address the chair. Chair recognizes that person. Member states their motion. I move to pay for our delegate to go to the district convention. Society may make that motion, or a district may make that motion for the national convention. And then a second. Purpose of a second is just that more than one person wants to talk about this issue. That's the only reason for having a second. This person who seconds doesn't have to agree. They just think, at least it's worth talking about. I was at a state League of Women Voters convention, and a motion was made when they were discussing the budget that they should eliminate the funds for scholarships. No one seconded that, because there was only one person who was interested, so we're not wasting everybody's time when only one person wants to talk about it, and it's probably going to get voted down. So second just means, yep, I think this is worth discussing. The chair then repeats the motion so everyone knows what you're talking about. Time for debate. When everyone's said what they want to say, then you have the vote. Call for those in favor, those against. The chair announces the vote. The ayes have it. We will pay for our delegate to go to convention. It gets a little more complicated when you have things like amendments and all of that, and we're not going to go into that. They do a decent job in here of explaining those sorts of things. So you have one main motion on the floor at a time, but you might have multiple other motions. You might have an amendment. You might have a motion that says to send it to a committee. Various other things going on at once. So, but in most societies, it's fairly straightforward. When the vote is taken, most main motions majority rules. What's a majority? More than half. It's not half plus one, it's more than half. There are some things, like your bylaws, you need more than that. You need generally 2/3 to approve your bylaws change. So there are a few other motions that take a 2/3, but most of the decisions you make is just a majority vote. If you are participating in a meeting, there are certain guidelines that you should be following. Very simply, pay attention. Know what's going on the floor. Request permission to speak, unless you're in a really small group. If you've got several people who want to speak at once, it's up to the chair to say, okay, go ahead, next, so on. Discuss the issue that's there. Don't try to bring something else into it. Oh, yeah, I guess we should have refreshments, but don't you think we should have decorations too? We're not talking about the decorations, we're talking about the refreshments now. It's up to the chair to bring the person back to talk about the issue we're talking about right now. Especially in a larger group or even a board meeting, it's helpful that the participants speak through the chair. You don't get this crosstalk. A lot of groups, you get back and forth, and it's this. You've got two people talking to each other, usually in one or two sentences. That's not debate. You want to be a little more formal than that, and you speak to the chair. I think we should check check with the treasurer, see if we have enough money to send our delegate. Madam President, could we do that? You don't turn to the person who made the motion and said, well, I don't think we have enough money to do that. You have a little more formal discussion, you can generally get through your business a lot quicker. Paying attention, not whispering, not having side conversations. If you have something to say it to the group. You should not be kibitzing in the background. And once the decision is made, once the majority makes a decision, it's the decision of the group. If you are a member of the board and you were in the minority, you still, as a member of the board, you have board loyalty. And you go out of that meeting and say, well, the decision of the board is this is what we're going to do. Not, I wasn't in favor of it, but the rest of them decided that they would do it. And no, it is board loyalty. If you cannot abide by that, you resign from that board. You don't go undercutting them by talking outside the group. I'm talking to a group next week, and that's one of the big things we talk about. Every year I do this for the latest class in that group. And it's very important that you support, as a member of the board, you support that board in whatever the majority decision is. But if you follow all the rules and realize that it is majority rule, you can get through your meetings. You can accomplish your goals and do it in a manner that everyone, they may not have been in the majority, but they will have been heard, and they should feel that they at least had their time to speak, and they had a part of that meeting. Questions?
Okay.
I think we've got some time for questions.
We do.
We went a little faster this time.
Consolidated. I did want to point out before we get to questions, if you go to the website, there are sample district bylaws There are sample zone bylaws, there's sample group or society, and there's some information about individual membership. And those resources are there to help you, and so please be aware that those are on the website and use those. There's also some a little bit further on, test your bylaw knowledge. They even give you an answer key, which is very good. And, definition of some terms, form, that sort of thing. So you may find that that's beneficial resource as well to use and have some fun with and see if anybody knows their bylaws questions. So somebody had a question I know earlier that she wanted to address, so I think it's going to be one from her.
Well, it's kind of twofold. When you were talking about I move and second discussion, favor those against, there used to be abstain too. Do we not use that anymore?
What?
Those that abstain.
Oh, no. Roberts does not allow for abstentions. You vote yes, you vote no, or you don't vote, but you don't call for or count abstentions, according to Robert's Rules of Order.
And then the second one was, if it comes from the executive committee, then you don't need a second?
Right. Again, going back to why do you have a second so that more than one person is interested in discussing it. So if it comes from the executive committee or any other committee, obviously, if they're proposing it, there's more than one person that wants to talk about it. So yeah, you don't need a second for a committee or executive committee recommendation. Yeah.
One of the things, President Patty was in for a little bit last session, and one of the things she recommended for district presidents was with your script, and I know as a former district president, when I conducted a convention, I had, like a 35-page script, what you were going to say, absolutely, written out word for word, that you have your parliamentarian sit down and go through that script with you and say, here you're going to need a motion. So that if you know that in advance, that's something you're calling from the floor and not an executive committee, that you have somebody lined up, ready to stand up and give that motion. And you may find that even I did it at Board of Agenda meetings, and that was very beneficial, and start, okay, we're going to vote on this, we need a motion here. And it's just a way of making sure you're a good leader and following and having it done and not stumbling around and being ready to do that. And I would have people lined up in advance to do some of those things.
That's not cheating.
That's not cheating.
No. Having a written out script for your convention or for even a board meeting, everything from I call the meeting to order to if there's no other business, we are adjourned. Write it all out. That way, if something interrupts, you can get right back to where you wanted to be.
And so even if you have that person in place to make that motion, you can script that motion?
And give it to them.
Okay.
Tell them what you want them to say. That's right.
I find in church meetings, things get all muddied up if you don't. What you were trying to get at, somebody moves and it's something completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that does help. And I know, like my secretary of the Minutes Review Committee, I know when I did Minutes Review here at the National Convention, we had a script and we followed it. Obviously you had to write in, you don't know what the offering is and you don't know what the registration count is going to be, and you have places to put that in. But if you don't do that, I strongly encourage you to do that. And as a district president, you put it on a flash drive. I don't know how to do it the other way for some of you younger people, but you give it to the next person on a flash drive. Maybe they can figure it out the next way how to do it. Change is good. So yes.
Okay, so sometimes sitting through voters' meetings, like for church,
Yes.
and there's not always a clear motion, and then people start doing amendments onto the motion. How does that, so do you have to vote down the motion and then add the amendments, or do you go from?
Now, it's up to the person presiding to be sure that everyone understands what the motion is. What you see a lot of times is there's a lot of discussion, and finally, we need to do that, and someone says, I so move.
Yeah.
What are, so it's up to the chairman to maybe say, okay, what I heard was this. Is that your motion? Someone last time suggested that the secretary read it, which is fine too, just so people know what we're starting with. Then if you want to amend it, you want to make changes, then you make the changes individually. You vote the amendments up or down. The ones that are used a lot in practice is I move that we buy a new computer for the secretary. Moved and seconded. Motion. I move to amend by inserting IBM before computer. Yeah, okay. What are we going to vote on now? Whether or not we should insert IBM. We're not and if it's voted, if it's approved, and again, you need a second and all of that. Okay, we vote yes on it. So now our motion is, I move that we buy an IBM computer for the secretary. Well, then maybe you will have another motion that says, I move to insert and printer. Okay, let's talk about that one. Maybe that gets voted down. No, we can't afford the printer. But then we go back to the main motion that says, I move that we buy an IBM computer for the secretary. Then you have to vote on that. You vote on all the different amendments, and then you come back, and the chair says, okay, the motion we have right now is to buy an IBM computer. All those in favor say aye, those opposed say no. So you work your way through all the different amendments, and then you as a whole, as it was finally, with all the amendments stated, that's what you vote on. Mm-hmm.
In district conventions, when the bylaws have already been published for the delegates ahead of time and printed in the manual and so on, is it necessary to read word for word all the changes and then what's proposed?
No. There is this marvelous phrase called, if there is no objection.
Right.
So you can say, or your bylaws chairman can say, will say, if there is no objection, we will not read the amendments in their entirety. They were sent out 3 months ago, and you have had time to look at it. And I can practically guarantee you, no one will say, I object, I want to hear them read. Yes, although I was at, a little over a year ago, I was at the National Convention of the National Association of Parliamentarians. At our conventions, we have the convention rules, kind of one page. They had 4 pages of convention rules. So the chair was there and said, if there's no objection, since we have the rules the same every year, we will not read them. Objection. They had to read them because someone wanted. I don't even know why, but even if there's an objection, you got to do it. But at our LWML meetings, I don't think you have to worry about that.
Speaking of the convention rules,
Yeah.
I went to a lot of conventions this summer where they read them verbatim. That is not necessary.
No.
Correct?
That's right. If they,
Yourself the time at your district conventions, do not do that.
yeah, you might want to just highlight, remind people. Remember to turn off your cell phones. If you want to make a motion, be sure you raise your hand. But you don't have to read them all in their entirety.
You do probably want to, if they're printed on page 59.
Yeah,
and you're
point out where it is.
Please refer to page 59, and if you have a large print manual or whatever, they're on such and such page for those individuals, so that they know where they are and can access them.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I want to go back to that recommendation. So that you don't need a second on the recommendation?
on a
If,
recommendation?
if it comes from your board or a committee, that's the same as having a second.
Okay, so then you can bring your recommendation out, and do you still have discussion after it?
Oh, yeah.
With them?
Yes, you still have to have discussion and vote, and maybe it'll get amended, but, yeah, you don't need a second on that.
Sounds like, because the committee is already multiple.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I see that's what they started doing in our district,
Yeah.
was you have to have a second, and I was like, I don't. think
not
you
from a
have to have second.
from a committee,
Not from a
no,
committee, because that's
Yeah.
more than one individual.
Right.
yeah.
If you printed the bylaws and you're ready for your convention to vote on them, and somebody wants to amend one part
Yeah.
of the bylaws, what's the procedure?
You would handle that just, usually what you'll do is, you may not read them all, but you would go through and say, okay, we have some amendments to Article 3. Are there any questions or amendments? Okay. Article 5, anything there. And when you would get to the point where someone wants to make an amendment, that's when they would do it. Is when you don't necessarily have read it, but you just say, okay, we're on Article 5. Is there any discussion on Article 5? And then someone's might want to make an amendment. And you follow through with processing just like any other amendment that you would have to have.
Does that amendment have to go back to the structure committee?
No,
Before
No.
it's part of our bylaw?
just,
It may have to have, and depending on what your bylaws say, what the majority is to pass. It may be more than the simple majority. It may, if it's amended, it may require a 3/4 rather than 2/3.
well, no,
Probably wouldn't.
because if you're just, you've got your proposed bylaws amendments. If someone wants to amend that, it's just a majority vote to make that amendment.
And then it's still
But then you've got to do the 2/3 for the whole thing. So, yeah.
But
you-
then when you send it back into
Yeah,
the
make sure it
structure
gets-
committee, you might want to highlight to them that this has been changed, amended, you know, and if it's, doesn't contradict,
Yeah,
usually we're gonna be fine with it, but
yeah.
just to draw it to our attention. Because sometimes we don't always go back and say, oh, well, they didn't
Yeah.
amend it, yeah.
So if they amend it, do you need a second?
Yeah. Oh, I-
Yes, yeah, if someone proposes an amendment, it has to be seconded, same as any other amendment, yeah.
Yes.
So it's seconded. and then do take
Then you-
a vote
then
on
you-
that
You'd have
amendment?
That amendment.
Okay. And then, if that's voted okay, then we take another vote on the bylaw.
At the end, you'll vote on all of the changes.
Yes, ma'am.
If somebody is chairing a meeting and the discussion ends up going kind of haywire, can that person then call back to order and go back to the motion?
You know,
How does that-
sometimes you might have to say this needs to maybe go to a committee for further review or discussion,
Yeah.
or
But, yeah, it's,
gently remind them, you know, we need to get back on task here.
yeah, it's up to the chair to control the meeting and control the discussion. And if it's going off into left field, okay, you make a good point, but
Yeah.
right now, this is what we're talking about, so we really need to focus on this.
And we need to maybe limit our discussion time to just giving everybody a couple minutes.
Yeah.
A lot of district bylaws don't have in there how long you can debate a motion, having read many district bylaws over the last 4
Yeah.
years. But thankfully, we work in a field of grace, you know, with God as our guide, and usually that's not an issue. Some of us remember maybe some meetings where it has been, but try to
Yeah.
gently get them back online. And then again, do it out of Christian love.
Yeah.
You know, be respectful of them and their opinions. You know, we're, like Barb talked about, you know, the nonprofits law here in Missouri that we, you know, are incorporated under. It's not really for maybe church organizations and stuff. It doesn't really operate the same way we do. And we can be thankful that we operate.
Yeah. The last page I gave you are some references, and what I should have put on there is my email, because I am a resource for you. So I will give that to you if you want to put it down. and I have among the shortest email addresses in the world. It is my initials, B as in boy, G as in girl, V as in Volk, at ioa.com. So if you need anything, please email me. I will be very glad to talk with you, offer my opinion. That's all it is. The chair, whoever is chairing the meeting, rules. The parliamentarian just offers an opinion. But I'll be glad to help out any way I can. You had a question? Pardon?
What was that domain again?
IOA stands for Internet of Asheville, which no longer exists, but they've let me keep my short and sweet email address. IOA.com.
Any other questions? Otherwise, according to
We're
the
about-
clock on the wall,
It's
it's
about
time
time.
for Auf Wiedersehen, and we appreciate you coming. We appreciate all the work you do in keeping your bylaws current and helping your districts and your zones and societies, groups to do the same thing. If you have any questions, please contact us. Otherwise, God's blessings, and I think have a few minutes before we get to go eat dinner. And
Yeah. If you have anything individual you want to come up and talk
to
about,
us.
we're
Thank
here.
you for coming.
Thank you.